Hi, and thank you for joining me for another video. And friends, this week's Parsha is Parashat Tetzei. And friends, similar to virtually the whole Torah, this Parsha deals with a notion that many run away from nowadays. And that's the notion of reality. The notion that Judaism is a real religion that deals with real problems of real people. A belief system that not only speaks to the Jew, but equally to the non-Jew in the same manner as the physical consequences for not keeping these mitzvot, these commands, affect all men the same. In other words, the commands in this Torah do not only affect some men, but all men. And my friends, this is what's being solidified here in this Parsha. The fact that reality is the only universal truth, a truth that does not discriminate. Because friends, that has always been the main difference between false and true religion. False religions have always given you what you wanted, while true religion gives you what you need, which is the main reason Judaism and the religious Jewish people today have become so morally irrelevant. Why? Because through mysticism, they have chosen not to live in reality. And this, in a nutshell, is what the Torah is here to counter, to equip us to live in the real world. How? Through moral training being outlined in these pasukim, which, although in themselves seem minuscule, in the long run produce a huge return that all of humanity could benefit from. Which, if you think about it, is the Torah's way of proselytizing through our actions. Like it states that the nations would see the commands that we adhere to and say, what a wise and understanding people. And what, friends? Well, the only logical conclusion is that they would want to join us. However, friends, you and I know that this is not the way things function nowadays. It actually seems that the more rational the command, the more of an urge Jews have to escape from reality. Which is why in the first parak of this parsha it mentions the command not to leave someone who was hanging overnight, reminding us that although we are just and our punishments are severe, we're still civilized. And this, my friends, is a notion that societies, especially nowadays, have a difficulty balancing. Why? Because civics without standards cannot exist. Because they both act sort of like a counterweight in the scales of a society, both validating themselves. Which is why the notion of a secular Jew never made much sense to me. Not to mention that it's not even halachic. The notion of representing a God that you don't believe in and then assuming that the title itself makes you in some way noble, that's nonsense. A Jew who is not God-fearing is halachically akin to a non-Jew who is not God-fearing, and many sources actually teach that they are less hopeless. In other words, any scenario, not just in religion, that tries to have civics without standards are doomed to have neither. And this is why you see in our modern day world where you have godless individuals, who by the way are disproportionately supposedly Jewish, assuming that any type of pain or any kind of discomfort that we incur on a guilty person is wrong, no matter what they may have done to somebody else. Elevating compassion at the expense of standards. Literally acting out what it says in Kohelet Rabbah, on that those who are kind to the cruel will be cruel to the kind. And then, friends, we see that the second parak of the Parsha goes on to speak about returning lost property and not standing idly by while your neighbor is in need. And friends, many assume, well, all this is just common sense. Why do I have to learn it from you? And that there, my friends, is where the major disconnect occurs. In that assuming that if we didn't have this moral code, we in some way would have figured this all out on our own. Or worse, have learned it in some ethics class in college. And friends, the reason that it seems or looks easy is mainly because we're viewing it from the shoulders of giants, from paths that have already been laid for us by those who came before us, who trusted enough in this book to instill our world with its ethics. But anyways, the Parsha, friends, building on the same notion, lets us in on one of the principles of civil progress. And that's the notion of separation, of knowing when to separate and when not to. Because, friends, it's through separation that we distinguish ourselves and ultimately make ourselves holy. We see that in the second paragraph. It goes on to state that God himself detests a woman dressing like a man or a man dressing like a woman. Clearly an example of separation. And then it goes on to speak on how one should scare a mother bird away before taking her eggs. Another example of separation in this case, to save the dignity of the mother bird. And then it states that when you build a house, that you should build a fence on the roof also to separate people from danger. And then it goes on to say, do not plant two kinds of seeds in your vineyard, do not plow with an ox and a donkey yoked together, do not wear clothes of wool and linen woven together. Are you beginning to get the hint, my friends, that having the ability to distinguish and even separate things are the first steps of ethical progress? And this, friends, is a notion that is virtually non-existent today. Because honestly, how many times have you heard a school teacher breaking up a fight between two kids, and then one kid will tell the teacher, well, he started, and the teacher responds, I don't care who started, you're both in trouble. Or the silly notion prevalent among liberals today that one's not supposed to generalize, or the comment, hey, that's Lashon Hora, that has people treating the wicked like the righteous and the righteous like they don't exist. But anyways, friends, the Parsha goes on to mention another topic, a topic that if you've been following the weekly Parashiot, you would know is the three gravest sins Israel could collectively commit. And that's the mistreatment of the convert, the orphan, or the widow. And tied to these three, does Hashem elsewhere state that if we collectively violate, he will personally destroy us. And friends, honestly, you have to give credit where credit is due. And that's that the Jewish people, especially in the last 100 years, have made huge strides to reaching out to, apart from just orphans, to uneducated Jews. Also, which according to Halacha could also have the status of orphans. Not to mention that the charity that has been done for not only widows, but for the Jewish poor in general is tremendous. However, friends, there is one area where the Jewish community not only has failed, but yearly, virtually, proactively has sought to torture the lives of those individuals. And that's with the convert. It states in this parsha, remember that you were slaves in Egypt and that Hashem redeemed you from there. Stating why he's commanding us to love the convert. Why? Because just as he redeemed us and helped us from darkness to light, in the same way we're supposed to help redeem every non-Jew around us looking for that better path. Because a convert here does not only mean someone who has converted, but also someone who's a potential convert. And what's most upsetting is that the average Jew won't even know that any mistreatment is going on in their community, and thus does nothing to stop it from happening. And friends, the mistreatment has gotten so severe that even the silly rabbinate in Israel has gone as far to do something that has never been heard of in Jewish law before, and that's the proactive nullifying of Jewish conversions. I know it's ridiculous, my friends. And this is why we're here today, to bring Jews and Judaism back to its foundation, so that we can all collectively, ethically progress and thus usher in the long-awaited age of peace. Friends, if you're hearing me today and you're an unaffiliated Jew or a non-Jew and you want to enter either in the Shekhinah or back into the Shekhinah, I want to welcome you to visit doordea.com and bejewish.org, and there you'll get information on how to do this. Thank you.